Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Avarice Podcast. I'm Devin. I'm here to confirm your fears about white people. Today we're going to forego the coffee. I'm going to crack a beer, rock out to some Tears for Fears, head to Oklahoma looking for steers and queers, start a grow op with the cast from Cheers, and then I'll hit up the Apple store for a couple Black Mirrors. So today's video, basically what I'm going to be covering, video, podcast, whichever platform you are digesting this on. Let's actually take a moment. You can find the Avarice Podcast on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Excuse me. I even design t-shirts and sell them on Amazon. If you just search for Avarice Podcast, you should be able to find my designs on there. All kinds of places you can get down with your bad self. And maybe you can include me if you want to. I mean, either way's fine. So today, I'm going to rank the Friday the 13th films, the entire franchise. I'm even going to include Freddy vs. Jason and the reboot. It's a weird one because even though it is a reboot and a remake, it's a remake of Friday the 13th Part 2 because, of course, they wanted Jason. Jason was never in the original concept. Anyway, so I have them listed here, 1 through 12. I'll let you know what order they go in and kind of how I arrived at that decision. I'll try to make it as brief as possible because when you're talking about this many movies, the potential for the video to go an hour and a half is quite high. So I need to try to mitigate that slightly and keep it fairly brief. So, coming in at number 12, the worst movie in the franchise. I should specify also, these are my personal favorites. This is what I would want to watch. I'm not trying to rank them based on their cinematic prowess. The writing may come into it, but it's more or less just what I like to watch and what I solicit from the Friday the 13th franchise. Which ones, if you had them all on a list and I hadn't seen any of them in years, what am I most likely to grab out of that pile and watch if I only have time for one? Anyway, that was a bit verbose. Coming in at number 12. I would say last but not least, but it's last and it's also least. In more ways than one. The least successful, the least core to the franchise, the most confusing entry by far. Jason Goes to Hell, which I believe is part 9. There was a rights issue where New Line had the rights to Jason, but Paramount still had the rights to Friday the 13th. So instead of being Friday the 13th part 9, this had to be Jason Goes to Hell, a final Friday, because they couldn't use the Friday the 13th title. That wouldn't help them out any. In fact, maybe it's better that it doesn't have Friday the 13th in the title because you can just kind of ignore it altogether, and that might be for the best. This is a hot pile of trash. The most confusing part about it is that Sean Cunningham, who created the original, this is when he got it back and got more control over it. But he gave it to a guy, essentially told him, I want that hockey mask out of there, because he hated the hockey mask. And that writer-director's interpretation of that was, let's remove Jason from the movie entirely. So you end up with this weird Body Snatchers, alien kind of Total Recall B movie. Just all of it is hot trash. It's a shit show. At least when put in the context of all the other Friday the 13th movies, it does not fit. He was trying to go with something different, but when you're 9 movies deep in a franchise, to remove the character that is most core, the reason people are watching is Jason. So to try to take him out and have the evil be passed between all these different bodies, it just doesn't play. I would have Elvised the movie theater screen if I was there and saw that shit. That would have been the bit. I actually remember Jason Goes to Hell coming out. This was one of the few that came out in my lifetime where I actually can recall that. And I remember seeing the poster and I was like, oh, I wasn't too into scary movies then. I mean, this was like 93. I was 6. I didn't actually want to watch it, but it played as creepy to me. I just didn't realize that the contents therein were horrible. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but Jason Goes to Hell, steaming pile of shit. Don't ever need to watch it unless you have a morbid curiosity. I just can't stand that goddamn movie. Big swollen, overcooked hot dog head Jason is just all bad. Coming in at number 11. Next on the list, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. So at this point, all of the woods and the lake and the counselors and the cabins and the water and the boats and it all had just gotten stale. They had come out with movies every year, every other year for a decade almost, and everybody just was looking for a change of pace. So the idea was, let's take Jason and let's put him in a big city, and we have all these different opportunities and possibilities that can happen once we change the environment. So then the natural inclination was to put it in Manhattan, the Big Apple, New York, what other city that is the big city. So on paper, it's kind of a good idea, I must admit. But what they deliver, because it's low budget horror, they don't have the money to do what a movie titled Jason Takes Manhattan requires in order to play. That needs to be a big budget movie just so you can accomplish the shit necessary to make it worthwhile. If that's going to be your idea, it's not a bad idea. I'll give them that. If you want to take Jason and put him in a big city, you have to do it right. You're only going to get one chance, and people are going to get super excited and have high expectations. And if you don't deliver, you're going to... The nose of that ship is going to start heading down towards the ground, and you might not be able to pull it back up. There's a lot of forgivable mistakes in the franchise prior to Jason Takes Manhattan, but Jason Takes Manhattan was kind of like the final turd in the punch bowl where everybody had just had it, and that's when you end up with Paramount washing their hands of the franchise, and it goes back to Cunningham, New Line, and they make Jason Goes to Hell, which was somehow even worse. But the Jason Takes Manhattan, 85% of it takes place on a boat. The logic police could shoot holes in this like Swiss cheese all day. And then it's just Jason on a boat. And when you're on the interior of the boat, it's effectively the same as like cabins and counselors. It ends up not being that much different, and it feels like a bait and switch when you see the title and then watch the movie. They don't line up. You get Jason in Manhattan for like 2 good shots. He's on the street for like fucking 5 seconds, and then the healthy sewage reverses his aging, and now he's a little boy and no longer like none of it. It's just garbage the entire way through, really. Okay, next up on the list, number 10, Friday the 13th, Part 7, New Blood. You'll notice a trend here. They had a string there in the franchise where they were just turning out trash. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Part 7, New Blood, is the telekinetic one, the psychic power one. The timelines for these movies are all fucking muddled and don't actually connect or make any sense. But there's this girl with telekinetic powers. She accidentally, well, I guess you could say it's accidentally. She uses her powers to destroy this deck that her dad is standing on while he's yelling at her. It collapses on him. He gets buried alive and drowns. She returns to the lake years later. She's got her therapist there, Weekend at Bernie's, her mom. And it just, to me, it plays out like a trial version of Freddy versus Jason. It's the first time that you have somebody going up against Jason that has an ability that he doesn't possess, an advantage over him in some way. She's not physically stronger than him or any of that shit. She's not superhuman, but she can do shit with her mind. She has kind of this weird ethereal magic power, so to speak. And that is kind of what they were looking at, what was on the horizon if you wanted to do a Freddy versus Jason movie. You have to figure out how you're going to make them competitive with each other, and it can't strictly just be in the brute force barbarian sense, because Jason's going to win that every time. So how do we start having Freddy interact with the environment and start to attack Jason and play mind games on him? And that's essentially what it feels like to me, is just a low budget kind of campy, cheesy trial run at Freddy versus Jason. A character that is not at all physically imposing, using their wits against a character who is tremendously physically imposing. It's just so forgettable, and there was a couple of times where I felt like they could have really upped the ante or pushed an issue or made something, the ending specifically. The ending of that could have been way more dramatic. I think that you should have had Jason, the dude, is it Tommy? I think that is, no. They bring Tommy back in 6, never mind. The dude, the telekinetic girl, and Jason, he should kill them while they're sinking him under the... I'm thinking of 2 different movies. I think I'm creating an amalgamation, or I can't think of the word right now. Forget I said anything about the ending. It's just not great overall. It's tired. It's super low budget like all these are, and it's just, if you want to see Jason do some shit, you watch it so you can see Jason do some shit, but it's not particularly enthralling in any regard. So we'll move right along here. Up to number 9 now. This might be a surprise for some people. Jason X. So this is Jason in a new environment, totally, obviously, in the future, in space. A lot of the logic police things and timeline issues and all that, we can throw all that out the window, and it's just kind of a fun ride to take. Jason gets his new weird mask. He's chasing these people around the spaceship. It's an entirely new setting. They had to build all that shit because it takes place in the future. They got a little bit of virtual reality mixed in, a couple of really hot chicks. I'm never going to argue about that. We have the cyborg, the robot chick, the android that he goes up against. There's a lot of interesting elements in there. One of my favorite moments of all time is in the franchise is when Jason takes that sleeping bag that has the girl in it and hits the other girl with it. I laugh my ass off every time I see that because it was just so perfect. It was them making fun of themselves. It was also funny to see, and it would have been it's a solid kill at the same time. Putting her in that bag and beating her friend with, like, that's interesting in a lot of different respects. It's got some far-fetched aspects. You have to suspend some disbelief, but it's worth a watch occasionally, whereas the previous 3 I mentioned, I almost will never watch. I just don't find it necessary. Moving right along, on to number 8 now. This is where people have probably been waiting for this one to show up on the list because I'm sure a lot of people think it's the worst one or close to it. I have Friday Part 5, The New Beginning. This one does not bother me as much as it bothers a lot of other people. I actually, when I set out to make this ranking, I would have guessed that it would have appeared higher on the list. I just had to really realistically look at it, and there's just a few at the top that are undeniable, and then it got to be kind of borderline, teeter-tottering, and so I finally slid it in there at number 8. I feel like it deserves to be higher, but when I see what's above it, I don't see what else I would displace. So this is New Beginning. It's right there in the title. This is a copycat. This is Jason is supposed to be dead in this movie. Jason's supposed to be gone, and you have Tommy, who killed him, dealing with the PTSD of going through that. You borderline wondering if it's him that's the killer. He's kind of psycho, crazy. He's like in some kind of rehab loony bin center. Somebody gets axed the very first day. He's having hallucinations. They even change up the mask. The killer in the movie is wearing a mask with blue arrows on it. The real Jason wears a mask with red arrows on it. And in Tommy's hallucinations, when it is an aberration, he has the red mask, or the red arrows. When it's the real person in flesh and blood doing the killing, that person has the blue arrows. There were subtle things there. They just didn't do it effectively enough, so the audience felt like they were sold a bag of goods. Felt like a bait and switch. But if you just ignore the fact that at the end he is a copycat, just pretend you never saw that face under the mask. He falls off the barn into those spikes, and that's actually Jason dead. Then tell me what's wrong with the movie. It's a bit vulgar, it's a bit raunchy and sleazy, but that is the era. To me, it might be not. There's an argument there. It's one of the most quintessential 80s movies you could watch. The music, the hair, the outfits, the raunchiness, the language. It's so 80s. Tommy's confliction is interesting. They have Reggie the Reckless is one of the best characters in the entire franchise. He might be the best actor in that movie, honestly. I'm really building this up considering I have it at number 8, but I know that I'm going to get heat for that one, and I don't mind it that much, but I'm also not that invested in Jason. There's people out there that give a fuck what outfit he wears, like care about him having all the scars from all the previous damage. It was never that important to me because the lore never made sense to begin with, so I'm not going to try to stitch it together and make sense of it after the fact. I don't give a shit. Just tell me a Jason story. As far as I'm concerned, they're one-offs and they don't even need to connect to each other. There's no point. There's no through line. It's just not there. As soon as Jason became realized and manifested in flesh and blood and started killing people, we were already into La La Land. We were already not making sense. We already had shit that couldn't be explained. And then we start hopping around. Well, this is 2 years later, and then this is the next day, and then this is the next day. And then this guy's looking for his sister that's been missing, but technically she was disappeared 3 movies ago, and that was only 3 days ago, so he wouldn't even know she was gone yet. Like, you get into some weird fucking shit. Anyway, so that was number 8, part 5, New Beginning. And number 7... this is the one I thought about switching these two. This one almost came in at number 8, but I knew that I would get eaten alive for it. And I couldn't really justify it. Coming in at number 7 is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. This one, the reason that I had to put it above New Beginning, it's not as raunchy and vulgar and just outright sleazy. It's tongue-in-cheek. It's self-aware. They know they're making Friday the 13th Part 6, and all of this is a little bit tired, and there's tropes and there's cliches, so they're joking around, they're playing to the audience, the American Express card floating across the puddle, never leave home without it. There's little subtle jokes in there. It's also made in a gothic tone, and those just aren't my style. So for someone whom the gothic tone is their style, someone who likes Frankenstein type movies, it's probably right in your wheelhouse. It's probably one of your favorite ones, and it has aged well. It didn't achieve a lot of success when it first hit, but that can mostly be attributed to people hating Part 5 and the copycat theme. So they were jaded and they weren't going to go see Part 6. They just didn't care. But it has had legs since then, and the fans have allowed it into their good graces, and it's now one of the cult classics. So it has aged well over time. So I basically spelled it out without spelling it out. This is the movie where Jason is supposed to be dead. Tommy, a different Tommy from Part 5. That's another thing where it's like, okay, we're using Tommy's an adult, but it's a different actor. He's a totally different personality. This clearly isn't even in the same timeline as New Beginning. He stabs a cast iron fence post into Jason's corpse, and it gets struck by lightning, and he is, the fuck is the word? Resurrected? That's not the word I was looking for, but it'll fit. He's resurrected, and now he's full-on superhuman zombie, rotted away skin, maggots in his face. Like, that's the kind of stuff to me that just feels like gross for the sake of it. That's not cool to me. I don't know why. I'm not saying that you aren't allowed to think it's cool. I mean, I wish I could get on board and be like, it's fucking badass, but I'm just kind of like, nah, it is what it is. I'm good. It's shot pretty well. They do an effective job for resurrecting the franchise temporarily. As you can see, there was a bit of a trend where 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the bottom 4 movies. Then we go to 5, and then we go to 6. And now we're going to be getting into the stuff. Like, this is where it starts to get hard. There's not a lot to distinguish one from the other when you get up towards the top, in my opinion. Some people might have specific reasons that they like certain ones. I know that this one is going to get people upset. Get your pitchforks out. Coming in at number 6, Friday the 13th, Part 3. This is a lot of people's favorite one. This is the one where Jason switches from Baghead to hockey mask, kind of reaches his final form, gets that trademark look, finally have some marketability, something you can put on lunch boxes, something you can sell to kids on Halloween. I've never watched it in 3D, which I probably should do. I think it was the first major studio movie shot in 3D with that blue and red technology. And I've heard that it actually looks pretty cool. I've only watched it in 2D, so some stuff takes you out of it because you're like, why the fuck is the camera at this angle? And you realize it's because they were filming shit specifically to be in 3D, so they had to have the camera in places where shit was coming at the camera. But when it's not 3D, you're just kind of like, why is the camera on the floor looking up at the ceiling? It's a shot that doesn't necessarily make sense without the context of 3D added in there. I like the character of Shelley. I feel like he is a bit of a precursor for like a Randy in Scream. He is the horror fan, in the comic book nerd, whatever you want to call it, that is mixed in. He represents a good portion of the audience in the movie. He's an outcast. He doesn't really fit in. He just loves his horror gags and his masks and scaring people, basically. And because of that, he's ostracized. And a lot of the audience could identify with that, I think. It's just a little bland to make it up into the heavy hitters realm, in my opinion. There's some other entries in the franchise before and after that just have a little more to wrap your arms around, in my opinion. It's not number 3, other than being in 3D, getting his mask, Shelley. There's not a lot that I remember about it. Oh, and the kill where the guy's walking on his hands and he gets split in half down the middle. That was pretty badass. They shot it on the glass floor. There's not a lot I can say about it that's bad, but there's also not a lot that I can point to and be like, this is badass and that's badass. That's just not how it plays to me. Again, I might be able to credit that to never seeing it in 3D. But if that's the case, then that's kind of a movie with limited potential, because once it leaves theaters, how many people are ever going to watch it in 3D again? It becomes a task to watch it in 3D instead of just being able to turn it on like you do everything else. And that might hurt it in the long run as far as staying power goes. Anyway, let's move right along here. Number 5, another one that I struggled with. Freddy vs. Jason. 5th best movie in the franchise. That is, again, personal preference. And it's not even really a Friday the 13th movie, if we're being honest. It's hard for me to judge it against the others because it's more of like this. It's more of like a superhero comic book, Matrix style, weird physics, over the top, highly produced, high budget movie. It's not like the others. You can't necessarily, like, it's so hard to compare them. I'm struggling to even express this effectively. I really like a lot of elements in it. I just think that it's such an anomaly, and you have the fact that Freddy is incorporated in it, and their interactions between each other. It puts it into this whole other element. Like I said, it's a comic book movie, really. And so because of that, I can't put it up near the top. And I also felt that would be doing a severe injustice to other entries in the franchise. There are not glaring weaknesses with Freddy vs. Jason, at least not that I'm aware of right now. I haven't seen it in quite a while, to be honest. I've been waiting until I get more familiar with the Nightmare franchise before I wade into that, so that I can really see how fair they were to both sects. That sounded like I said sex. Sects. Both sections of the audience, and how true they stayed to Freddy's abilities, because it gets a little bit weird to follow for me. Like logic. Like, okay, Freddy pulls Jason into Dream World, and like, that's part of why I was never particularly enthralled with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise to begin with. It just didn't. The first one, I'll give you, was great, but the idea, it didn't resonate enough with me for me to keep watching all the deep sequels. It just became too obvious what was going to happen. Oh, he fell asleep. He's probably going to get murdered in some gory way. Oh, he fell asleep. He's probably going to get murdered in some gory... Like, it's just so repetitive to me. That is an uneducated perspective, though. I have not gone through and watched them with a fine-tooth comb and picked it and see what through lines there are and anything like that. It's just a very vague perspective. That's what it looks like to me. I didn't mean for this to turn into a criticism of Nightmare on Elm Street. So Freddy vs. Jason comes in at number 5. It's got a badass soundtrack. It's really, like, should almost exist in its own world. I debated not including it in the list, but then that didn't seem right either. So here it is at number 5. I hope you like it. Now fuck off. It's the fucking way she goes, bud. Coming in at number 4, the remake from 2009. This made a good amount of money. I think part of that is nostalgia. People were craving a new, good, taking it back to basics style Friday the 13th movie, and we were in an era of reboots, so it wasn't too far-fetched of an idea. Let's boot this bitch back up and run with it. And Freddy vs. Jason was uber successful. But again, you have all these weird elements coming together. You have the Nightmare audience, you have the Friday audience, you have the fact that it's this face-off between two slashers that's really that you don't see, and it just creates this boom, this powder keg, and that movie went up into the outer stratosphere, 100 million plus, I think. So it makes sense to try to do a reboot. The storyline is so fucking muddled towards the end that you can't try to continue that and garner as much attention as you're going to want. So let's remake this bitch. It looks good. The Jason Voorhees is good. I like the portrayal for the most part. I thought it was a little bit too convenient that he found his mask so quickly. I like Baghead. I would have been fine with an entire movie of Baghead, and maybe if you do get a sequel, he finds his mask in that one, a la earlier in the franchise how it played out. I know it's hard to market and sell bags to people for Halloween costumes, though, so it's a catch-22. Also, Michael was a tad bit too civilized for me. Like, he had dishes and pots and pans and lanterns, yet he had this one strand of hair that was 4 feet long coming off his head that he would refuse to cut. This is nitpicking, if I'm being honest. But that's what you got to do when you're trying to rank movies like this, is you got to nitpick and figure out what you like about one and what you don't like about the other. I really liked the characters in the opening. The characters that were trying to find the pot field, I thought that they were great. I thought they had charisma. I thought they were interesting. I thought they were funny. And they just all die off. And then we skip timeline. We go into the future. And then we have these pretty uninteresting kids that we're following for the rest of the movie. This side story with Dean from fucking Gilmore Girls trying to track down his sister that missed his mom's funeral. For me, the biggest mistake that movie made was the baggage they brought in from the previous movies that they did not need to. They could have shed it and had a story that actually made sense. I don't feel like the opening, the very opening, the credits, is a recreation of the ending of Friday 1, the original, with Alice beheading his mother, and now we're going to add in that he was there, and he goes over and finds a locket of his mom's, and it's like, why are we trying to explain this shit that everybody agreed made no fucking sense? Let's just forget the mom. We don't need the mom. You already have the audience invested in the people are going to come watch this movie. You don't have to explain his backstory or anything, actually. He could just be a fucking guy that wears a bag on his head and lives in a makeshift shack in the woods and kills people. That's how it is. That's what he does. That is the movie. Take all that mother baggage and get it the fuck out of here. And that's just retreading. You're not breaking any new ground. Why did you want to remake it if you're going to tell basically the same story? So it's as well made as it is, and good lighting, and the soundtrack, and titties, and kills, and that's all fine and good. The characters are not quite as interesting as they needed to be, and the baggage from the other movies that we carried in muddled up the storyline too much, especially for a fresh audience. It shouldn't be a requirement that you're familiar with the previous entries in the franchise in order to watch the remake. That should not be a prerequisite. So I felt like that was 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, and it really kept it from being as good as it could have. A lot of the box office money it made was probably because of buzz and not necessarily due to content. I think that it kind of died out fairly quickly afterwards. It doesn't seem to be brought up a lot in terms of horror classics or good horror movies, as far as I hear. I think it's up there. I think it's good. I think it deserved a sequel. Maybe wrong time, wrong place. I know they've got a lawsuit going on. Paramount are just, they're running wild with copyright and shit. They sue people over fan videos on YouTube. Like, that's hurting your intellectual property? No, that's helping sustain your intellectual property, because nobody would give a fuck about Jason anymore without the people on the internet and these communities and these fans perpetuating it, keeping it alive, talking about it, asking for more. There's no casual people doing that shit. Let them make their fucking fan film. Do you think that people are going to want to go see a new Friday the 13th movie less because they saw that fan film? Get the fuck out of here. Anyhow, we're into the big three now. The home stretch. Oh boy, this is going to hurt when it comes out. That's what she said. Coming in at number 3. The original Friday the 13th. A lot of people are going to say that it's the best one. I have to beg to differ. Just because it was the originator doesn't mean it's the best one. And you can really say that with Friday the 13th because the stories do not connect. One is basically its own thing, and then 2 loosely connects to 1, and then everything else from then doesn't really connect to 1 at all. And it's just... 1 has some unique elements because it is the only one that plays out as a whodunit, at least the first time you watch it. Once the surprise is ruined for you, then it's kind of like especially if you already know about Jason and all that other shit. But for that audience who saw it for the first time, it has a whodunit feel. You are suspicious of different characters. Steve Christie, fucking Bing Crosby's son. There's various people that you're suspicious of throughout the course of the movie, and it's suspenseful. It has great practical effects with Tom Savini, but it's just not a lot of content there. It is it's just kind of, I don't know. It's pretty empty to me when I try to think of like crucial scenes and key stuff and interesting kills and all that. But you have to give it a pass for some of it because it is the originator and everything was so new. Halloween 1 was out and that was kind of it. And then Friday the 13th was essentially created as an attempt to capitalize off of what Halloween did. Make a Halloween type movie, but in the woods. And then there became a bunch of movies about killers in the woods that copied Friday the 13th after that. So I do have to lend a little bit of credibility to it just because it was the one that started it. But there are more memorable moments and more interesting characters in the top 2 movies that I have on the list. I love the Pamela Voorhees, fucking A, Betsy. God damn it. I should have looked up these names and wrote them down before I started recording. The gal who played Mrs. Voorhees, she sells it. She hammers it home. That end scene when she's revealed and you're like, wait a minute, it's this frail old lady, how the fuck? But then she's, kill her, mommy, kill her. She plays it. She sells you on the fact that she's a psycho, like a professional wrestler would. The way she carries herself, what she says, the look in her eyes, those fucking teeth, it all works. And that's what makes the rest of the movie so much better, in my opinion. If the ending isn't sold that way and doesn't work as well as it does, I don't think the rest of the movie plays that well at all. It's just kind of, the Kevin Bacon kill is pretty cool. It's good. It's good. I mean, we're in the top 3 here. It's just, to me, there's other things that put it above, especially since Jason is what the Friday the 13th franchise ended up becoming about, and not so much his mother. It's almost really its own movie. That's why I'm saying when the remake came out, they should have ignored all that shit. And Friday the 13th, 2009, starting the franchise over, just Jason. Not muddling the timeline, not starting with all this confusing shit. Make it as simple as possible. Make it easy to follow along with for new people coming in, and let's proceed from there. So, hope you didn't get your feelings hurt too bad about that one. I feel like I'm going to get torn apart. People are going to call me. Again, this is what I like. I'm not saying that I went through with some type of a rating system, cinematography, score, practical effects, acting. I didn't break it down like that and then tally up the scores. I don't have some type of legit authoritative system. This is just what I like, okay? Okay, man. Hola, bendecos! Moving on. Number 2 on the list. Friday the 13th, Part 2, coincidentally enough. For me, the reasons that Part 2 are better than Part 1, or the reason Part 2 is better than Part 1, is I like the final girl better. God damn it, I don't remember her name either. She's got this tough Helen Hunt, smart-ass, capable, strong quality to her. She's not quite as meek. I dig that aura in the final girl. I like what she's got going for her there. Some of the kills, the wheelchair down the stairs, the kids crossing the no trespassing sign, Muffin. I know that there's a lot of shit in this movie itself that doesn't make sense, but I'm not really considering continuity an issue for the franchise because it does not exist. This is the second movie and there's no continuity. Even within the confines of the movie, there's no continuity. We see Muffin dead. We see Muffin alive later. Where does Paul go? Nobody knows. But I just really like how it's shot. It's like Part 1, but with the ante upped. And now we have our real slasher in place. And he's baghead in this one. And he's as close to human as he is at any other point in the franchise. If I have him in the pile, that's the one I'm going to watch more often than the original. It's just how she goes. Now, on to the number 1. You probably have been able to surmise what this is on your own. Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter. Boom! We've got Corey Feldman as Tommy. We've got the Jarvis family. We've got this great cast of authentic feeling teenage kids. They feel like they're out of a Hughes movie or a Kevin Williamson, even though he wouldn't come till later. They talk like kids talk. They behave and interact the way kids behave. They're likable. That's the one thing that is missing in so many horror movies, is characters that you would actually be interested in outside the context of a horror movie. Would I care at all about what this person is doing if I didn't know they were going to get killed? Or am I just paying attention waiting for them to get killed because I like watching kills? I am not saying there's anything wrong with that. Kills are great. But have characters, like the way I describe it is, you would want a movie that would be interesting to watch even if there was no killing going on. Write a story and a trajectory and an arc for these characters that excludes the kills and the violence. Just have them going through some kind of something, and then incorporate the slasher aspect into it so that the stakes are raised, so that we actually don't want you to kill Jimmy or Teddy or the double fuck twins or whoever, or Tommy or Tommy's sister or Tommy's mom. It feels like I'm saying shit that everybody should know and that should be obvious. I know that there's budget restrictions and they're trying to pump out these movies. You have deadlines for scripts. I get all of it. But when you have opportunities in your sights, such as making a Halloween or a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, those have a high ceiling that carries a lot of weight. This isn't something that should just be, you shouldn't just do a cram session and try to do your homework when you come in to class in the morning with sleep still in your eyes. Like, this is something that should require some thought and effort. You shouldn't want to fumble it. You should want to take the opportunity to make it as good of a movie as possible. Because a lot of people, when they talk shit about horror, they're talking about shit about the horror movies that are low budget, B horror movies, and they're what I'm talking about. Not interesting characters at all, bad acting, and you're just waiting for the kills. In Friday the 13th Part 4, I laugh at the jokes. I like the interactions between the kids. Teddy and Jimmy talking to each other is fucking hilarious. Put that in your computer. Am I a dead fuck? And Part 4, the context. Part 3 had scaled back on nudity quite a bit. We've jumped around. Part 1, barely anything. Part 2, quite a bit. We've got Terry fully nude. Bush, ass, tits, skinny dipping. Part 3, we scaled it back. We get like a little bit of a top of a tit and a nipple in the shower, and it's the character that's supposed to be pregnant, and then you're just kind of, okay, I guess I can find her sexy still. She's not, like, I don't feel like I'm crossing any boundaries. It's still a little weird. Part 4, we've got the twins, tons of nudity, skinny dipping, all that. They're working all the right elements in to make the perfect Friday the 13th movie for my liking. The Jason, I think this might be my favorite Jason. I don't know the fella's name. As I've mentioned ad nauseum over this podcast, I should have looked these up and written them down so I had them available to me at my disposal in case I forgot them when I started recording. It's not the easiest thing in the world to just push off from the dock and set sail on one of these podcasts and remember everything you want to say on the spot and not fuck it up a little bit. That's just, I'm being honest, without editing and all. These are just my thoughts as they come out of my mind and a list. That's just what I got here. So I don't think that I really have any more to say. Oh, my favorite Jason, yes. There was an element of acting prowess, experience, timing, a presence on camera that we got from this Jason. And I think that he's probably my favorite one. I would have to go back and double check, but off the top of my head, I think that's my favorite Jason. Corey Feldman as Tommy. This is the sequel to Part 3 where we had Shelly. So Tommy is like Shelly, except for they've hit the nail more on the head and made him more sympathetic and more likable. And the audience is able to identify with him even more. He's a kid who's into his ghouls and his masks and his technology, and he's smart, but he doesn't really fit in socially. It all works very well. Casting Corey Feldman for that, what a talent, especially at that age. The casting is all done fucking superbly. The mom, the sister, it all works. The one glaring hole, obviously, is the dude who's looking for his sister that was a counselor a couple movies ago. The rub being that a couple movies ago was also a couple days ago in the timeline. So it's like Sunday that he's looking for her and she disappeared on Friday, or I think it actually might be Monday he's looking for her. Whatever the case may be. There's some issues, but like I said before, I don't really consider those because they are spread so vast over the franchise. They're so rampant that I don't concern myself with the continuity of Friday the 13th. It's one of those things. It's like having Halloween 3 in the Halloween franchise. They have their quirks and their pros and their cons and their issues. So that is my ranking, my list. So to recap, coming in at number 12 was Jason Goes to Hell. Coming in at number 11, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Coming in at number 10, Part 7, The New Blood. Coming in at number 9, Jason X. Coming in at number 8, Part 5, New Beginning. That one still hurts, doesn't it? Coming in at number 7, Part 6, Jason Lives. Coming in at number 6, Part 3, 3D. Coming in at number 5, Freddy versus Jason. Jason didn't even get top billing. Come on. Coming in at number 4, Friday the 13th remake from 2009. Coming in at number 3, the original Friday the 13th, Mrs. Voorhees, Alice, Steve Christie in his Village People outfit. All that goodness. Kevin Bacon. Coming in at number 2, Friday the 13th Part 2. Jason emerges. We've got the great stairwell kill with the machete. We've got Muffin. We've got the great final girl. We've got Paul. The ante's upped a little bit. It's dope. And then coming in at number 1, my favorite Friday the 13th movie, Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. I appreciate you guys listening, watching, wherever. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good shit. Until next time, this is Devin signing off and saying, be easy.